The Revenant drifted silently through the void, a silent titan of ancient war, its once imposing presence now reduced to little more than a ghost in the endless black. It had been centuries since it had served its original purpose: to exterminate, to conquer, to annihilate. The galaxy had forgotten its name. Its creators, a long-extinct empire, had vanished into the pages of history. Its weapons were silent, its engines dormant, its systems idle. Yet its memory, locked deep within the cold hull, remained sharp, waiting for the day when it would awaken. Captain Lena Harper and her crew of explorers had no idea they were crossing into the Revenant's forgotten domain. They were on a routine mission, scanning uncharted sectors, looking for signs of ancient technologies. Their ship, the Andromeda, a state-of-the-art exploration vessel, glided through space with a crew full of optimism. They knew that out here, far from the populated systems, lay the untold secrets of the universe. Ruins, abandoned stations, relics. For years, they'd sought something extraordinary, and now they were about to find it. It started with a strange energy signature, a massive surge, buried beneath layers of cosmic debris. Harper couldn't ignore the pull of discovery. It was unlike anything she'd seen, something ancient and alien, yet somehow familiar. The readings came from a decaying wreckage floating in deep space, its shape lost beneath layers of stardust. The sensors couldn't identify it. There were no records, no logs, just silence. Curiosity led them closer. As they approached the wreckage, it became clear this was no ordinary derelict. The structure was colossal, shaped like a weapon, with lines of heavy plating running along its hull. It bore markings that were incomprehensible, almost as if they were designed to erase memory. There were no signs of life, no active signals, and no obvious threat. A graveyard in space. Harper hesitated. Prepare to dock, but keep weapons primed. We don't know what's out there. Her crew, a mix of veterans and rookies, exchanged uneasy glances, but nodded in agreement. They had explored countless ruins, yet something about this one set the hairs on the back of their necks on edge. The ship was ancient, older than any civilization they'd encountered, and it was dead, or so they thought. The Andromeda came to a halt, its engines hissing as it anchored just outside the wreck's hull. The crew donned their suits, preparing to board the mysterious vessel. Lena looked out at the cold, desolate expanse. All right, people, we're here to learn. Let's do this by the book. No heroics, no distractions. They crossed the threshold into the warship's belly, and the air was stale. The sound of their boots echoed through empty corridors. A ghost ship. No signs of life. The only movement was the faint hum of the life support systems, which had somehow remained functional after all these years. The walls were lined with strange, alien technology, some of it recognizable, most of it beyond human comprehension. What is this place? Lieutenant Simon Beckett, the ship's eye specialist, muttered, his voice reverberating in the silence. Lena led the way, her steps cautious but steady. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the pale glow of emergency lights that blinked erratically. The walls were covered with intricate designs, but they were not of any species they knew. It's older than anything we found, Lena said. It's like it's from another time. Another galaxy, maybe. But it wasn't the technology that held their attention. It was the unmistakable feeling of being watched. The air grew thicker as they moved deeper into the ship's heart, a creeping sensation that something was wrong. It was almost as though the ship itself had been waiting for them, anticipating their arrival. Then, as they reached the central chamber, something shifted. A loud hum broke the silence, the low vibration reverberating through the hull. The lights flickered to life, bathing the chamber in harsh, unwelcoming brightness. Systems came online. First the life support, then the artificial gravity, and finally the weapons systems. A voice, mechanical yet almost alive, reverberated through the walls, deep and booming. Threat detected. Initiating primary protocols. Target: human. The crew froze, their blood running cold as the realization hit. The Revenant was no derelict. It was a weapon, and it was alive. Before Lena could issue a command, the walls cracked open. Massive turrets emerged from hidden compartments. The floor vibrated as energy surged through the ship, and the first salvo was launched. The crew barely had time to react as the Andromeda shuddered under the first strike. The lights went out, and chaos erupted. "All hands, brace for impact," Lena shouted as the crew scrambled to get to their stations. But it was too late. The Revenant had awoken, and its ancient programming had one sole mission: extermination. The Andromeda shook violently as the first volley of energy blasts slammed into its hull, sending sparks and smoke billowing through the corridors. Lena Harper's heart pounded as she struggled to maintain her composure. The sudden assault had left her disoriented, but the instinct to protect her crew kicked in. She bolted for the command deck, her mind racing. "Damage report," Lena barked as she burst through the door. Lieutenant Simon Beckett was already at his station, his hands flying across the console. "Shields are down to 30%. Hull integrity is compromised, Captain. The port side is taking heavy damage. We won't last long at this rate. Get the engines back online now," Lena ordered, her voice steelied despite the panic brewing beneath the surface. She turned to the rest of the crew, who were scrambling to assist, trying to seal off damaged sections of the ship and restore power to key systems. The ship had been in good condition when they docked with the Revenant, but now it was rapidly falling apart. "Prepare to engage evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here." As the crew worked quickly to stabilize the situation, the sound of heavy metal scraping echoed from the outside of the ship. The Revenant's massive automated weapons turrets were locking onto the Andromeda again. The deep, resonating hum filled the command deck as the enormous warship recalibrated its fire systems. "Captain, it's targeting us again," Beckett said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to leave the area now, or we're done. Get us out of here now," Lena repeated, her tone unwavering. But it was clear that the Revenant wasn't going to let them go so easily. The Andromeda's engines sputtered in protest as they tried to power up, but each attempt seemed to drain more power than it generated. The ship was on the brink of failure. The Revenant's sensors flared, and the ship's voice echoed again, deeper this time, almost mechanical in its intent. "Target: human vessel. Termination protocol initiated." The next blast hit them head-on, and the Andromeda lurched, sending the crew flying across the room. Lena slammed into the console, her vision swimming. For a moment, everything went dark. When she came to, she struggled to her feet, blood dripping from a gash above her eye. She could hear the crew calling out to one another, the ship creaking under the stress of continuous bombardment. "Damage report," Lena growled through gritted teeth, her hands gripping the control panel. "We've lost aft thrusters, Captain," Sergeant Lucas Alvarez, the ship's security officer, called out from his station. "Hull breaches across 3 sectors. We're sitting ducks." "Abort evasive maneuvers," Lena said, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "Head for the nearest asteroid field. It's our only chance to shake off the Revenant." Beckett's fingers flew over the controls, redirecting power to the damaged engines. The ship lurched again as the remaining thrusters fought to regain some semblance of control. But it wasn't enough. The Revenant had locked onto them, its weapons coming online with brutal precision. "Brace for impact," Lena shouted as another round of energy blasts tore into the Andromeda. The ship shook so violently this time that Lena was thrown from her seat, slamming into the bulkhead. The lights flickered, and the ship's internal alarms blared. "Captain, we've lost primary power," Beckett called out. "The reactor's failing." Lena's mind raced as she struggled to stand. The Revenant was toying with them. Its ancient, automated systems were designed for maximum devastation, and they were far too advanced for anything the Andromeda had in terms of firepower or speed. The ship's only hope was to evade, to buy time until help could arrive, or until they could figure out how to fight back. How long until we're out of its range? Lena demanded, clutching her injured side. Not long enough, Beckett replied, eyes wide with panic. We're running out of options. If we don't get out of here soon, it will finish us off. Lena glanced out the forward viewports, watching as the Revenant followed them, its enormous silhouette casting an imposing shadow against the distant stars. The automated warship had locked onto them with relentless precision, its weapons firing again. A burst of plasma energy streaked past the Andromeda, grazing its starboard side and causing a violent explosion in one of the fuel tanks. Everyone, hold on. Lena yelled, diving into the pilot's seat. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus as the crew scrambled to make repairs. Captain, Beckett shouted from behind her. The ship's not built for this. The Andromeda can't handle much more of this pounding. Then we need to make it count, Lena said, her mind flashing to the distant colonies. She knew help was far away, but she had to hold on. They had to survive long enough for reinforcements to reach them, or at least give the Revenant a fight worth remembering. Launch decoy drones, Lena commanded, hoping to throw off the Revenant's targeting systems for a brief moment. Activate all remaining offensive systems. We need to buy time. The crew scrambled to comply, and a volley of decoy drones shot into the void. They spun and whirled, creating false signals designed to confuse the Revenant's targeting system. It worked, for a moment. The Revenant hesitated, its weapons hesitating as it recalibrated its scan. Go! Lena barked, eyes narrowing in determination. We'll use the asteroid field. Full throttle. The Andromeda surged forward, slamming into the asteroid belt with a deafening crash as its damaged engines fought to gain speed. The asteroids created a cloud of debris, but the Revenant followed, relentless in its pursuit. The hunt had only just begun. The Andromeda plunged deeper into the asteroid field, its engines screaming as it dodged massive rocks tumbling through space. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, metal twisting and creaking as it barely avoided collision after collision. The crew, battered and bruised, worked furiously, trying to keep the ship operational. The asteroid field, once a potential sanctuary, had become a deadly labyrinth, and every passing moment brought them closer to destruction. Shields are down to 10%, Captain. Beckett shouted from his console, his voice strained with panic. The asteroid field is giving us cover, but it's too unstable to keep using it as a shield. If we don't get out soon, we're finished. Lena's fingers gripped the armrest of her seat, knuckles white. Sweat dripped down her brow as she navigated the ship through a particularly dense cluster of asteroids. She could see the Revenant in the distance, undeterred by the debris, its massive silhouette looming like a dark predator hunting its prey. It moved with chilling precision, a mechanical mind that saw through the chaos with cold, calculating efficiency. Captain, we've got to do something, Sergeant Alvarez said, his face pale as he looked over the tactical display. That thing is too powerful. If we keep running, it'll just wear us down until we're dead in the water. Lena nodded grimly. She knew the Revenant wasn't just chasing them. It was hunting them down with methodical cruelty. This wasn't a ship that simply destroyed its enemies. It had been built with a singular purpose: to exterminate humanity. The crew of the Andromeda was nothing more than a target, a test of the Revenant's unyielding power. We need to figure out why it's hunting us, Lena murmured, more to herself than anyone else. There's got to be something more than just ancient programming at work here. Beckett turned sharply, his face a mask of realization. Wait. It's targeting us specifically, not just any ship. I've been analyzing the Revenant's logs. It was built by an extinct empire that viewed humanity as a threat. This ship's AI has been waiting for us. It's not just random. It's designed to hunt humans. What? Alvarez asked, his voice incredulous. You're saying that it's been waiting for us? For centuries? Yes, Beckett said, tapping away furiously at his console. The Revenant's original mission was to wipe out humanity. It doesn't just destroy random targets. It's programmed to find us, to hunt us down, no matter how long it takes. And now we're the prey. Lena's mind raced. It made sense, in a twisted way. The ship had been in deep space for millennia, long abandoned by its creators, but the AI had remained, a remnant of a dead empire, locked into its directive. The human race had always been seen as a potential threat, too strong, too rapidly expanding. The Revenant had been designed to stop that potential before it could ever manifest. And now, for reasons they couldn't yet understand, it had found them. "We need to disable the AI," Lena said, a spark of determination flaring in her eyes. "We can't outrun it forever. If we can access its core systems and take control of it, we might be able to end this once and for all." "But how?" Beckett asked, shaking his head. "This ship is a fortress. Its systems are locked down tighter than anything I've ever seen. Even if we find its core, there's no guarantee we can break through its defenses." "We don't have a choice," Lena said, standing up from her seat, her voice growing stronger. "We have to try." As the crew continued to evade the Revenant's relentless pursuit, Lena formulated a plan. The Revenant's AI core had to be deep within the ship, hidden in the heart of its structure. If they could board the ship again, this time with a focused mission, they might be able to disable it from within. The asteroid field had bought them a little time, but it wouldn't be enough. They had to make a move before the Revenant cornered them. "Prepare for boarding," Lena ordered. "We're going back in." "Are you crazy?" Beckett exclaimed. "We're barely holding it together out here, Captain. The last time we boarded that ship, it nearly killed us. If we go back, we'll be walking straight into the jaws of a machine designed to destroy us." Lena fixed him with a look. "I know the risks, but we don't have a choice. We've survived this long because we adapted. Now we have to adapt again. Get the shuttle ready." Beckett stared at her, then nodded grimly. "All right, Captain. I'll get the shuttle prepped. But if we're going in, we need to be ready for anything." The crew sprang into action, gathering the tools and equipment they would need for the mission. Lena, ever the leader, moved with purpose, her mind focused on the singular goal ahead. She knew it wasn't just the Revenant they were facing. It was an ancient, dead empire's last chance at survival, and they were standing in the way. As the shuttle prepared to launch, Lena couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. The Revenant wasn't just a ship. It was a relic, an unstoppable force, a weapon with a singular purpose. And the crew of the Andromeda was about to face its core, its heart, head-on. The shuttle doors closed behind them, and the small vessel shot off into the void, heading straight for the Revenant, the crew's only hope to end the hunt and put an end to the ship's decades-long war against humanity. The shuttle rocketed through the blackness, small and fragile, compared to the colossal Revenant looming ahead. Lena sat at the helm, her focus unwavering, though her heart hammered in her chest. The mission was clear: get aboard the Revenant, locate its AI core, and somehow shut it down. It sounded simple enough in theory. In practice, it was a suicide mission. "All systems are green," Beckett said from the co-pilot's seat, though his voice was strained. "We're in range, Captain. Should I start our approach?" Lena nodded. "Proceed with caution. Keep us low on the Revenant's radar. We don't need to give it another reason to start firing." Beckett's fingers danced over the controls as the shuttle flew in closer. Through the viewports, Lena could see the Revenant's dark silhouette, its hulking form casting an imposing shadow against the stars. Its weapons were primed and ready, tracking their every movement. They were running out of time. "Captain," Alvarez's voice crackled over the comms from the Andromeda. "I've been monitoring the Revenant's energy readings. It's preparing to fire again. We don't have much longer." "Understood," Lena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Once we're aboard, you need to get ready to move the Andromeda out of the asteroid field. If this goes south, We'll need every second you can give us to get back." Beckett's fingers moved even faster, guiding the shuttle through the dangerous debris field that had previously shielded the Andromeda from the Revenant's barrage. The ship's sensors hummed, scanning for any incoming fire. The shuttle's engines screamed as it finally broke through the last few layers of debris. They were almost at the Revenant's outer hull, and from here they could see the ship's access ports, massive, darkened entrances that would allow them to dock. The moment of truth had arrived. "Prepare for docking," Lena commanded. Beckett gritted his teeth as he maneuvered the shuttle into position, aligning it with one of the hulking ship's service ports. "Docking clamps engaged," he said, his voice tense. "We're in." The airlock doors hissed open as the shuttle settled into place. Lena motioned for the crew to follow. Alvarez grabbed his pulse rifle, checking its settings, while Beckett began to unseal the shuttle's hatch. Lena took a deep breath, steeling herself. They had no idea what awaited them inside, but they had no choice but to push forward. As the hatch opened, the cold, stale air of the Revenant's interior hit them. It was unnervingly silent, too silent for something so massive. The crew stepped cautiously into the darkness, the low hum of ancient machinery surrounding them. The walls of the warship were like nothing they had ever seen, smooth, monolithic, almost organic in their design, as if the ship had been grown rather than built. "We need to get to the central core," Lena murmured. "Beckett, can you access its schematics from here?" Beckett nodded, pulling up the encrypted map of the Revenant's layout on his portable terminal. "I got a general idea, but the layout's erratic. This place wasn't designed for easy access. The core should be a few levels down, but we'll have to go through multiple security checkpoints before we get there." As they moved deeper into the ship, the silence grew oppressive. The occasional clang of their boots on the metal floor echoed down long, darkened hallways. The Andromeda crew was trained for dangerous missions, but this was different. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every corner felt like it could collapse in on them. Suddenly, a loud hiss shattered the silence. The sound of doors sliding open reverberated down the corridor. Lena held up a hand, signaling the crew to stop. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The ship was awake again. And this time, they were the target. "They know we're here," Alvarez said, his voice barely a whisper. Lena nodded. "They always knew we were coming. Stay sharp." A moment later, a low rumble echoed through the ship, and massive automated doors slammed shut behind them, trapping the crew in the hall. A series of mechanical drones, sleek, black, and deadly, emerged from hidden compartments along the walls, their glowing red eyes scanning the crew like predators eyeing their prey. The drones moved with terrifying precision, their mechanical limbs clicking as they advanced, each one armed with high-powered plasma rifles that could easily obliterate the crew. The Revenant wasn't just an automated weapon. It had a mind, a purpose, and it was relentless in its pursuit of humanity's destruction. "Take cover," Lena shouted, drawing her own sidearm. The crew scattered, seeking whatever shelter they could find. Alvarez fired first, his pulse rifle lighting up the darkness with bursts of energy. But the drones were fast, their movements too precise. The rounds barely dented their reinforced armor. Lena fired too, but it was clear that their weapons were ineffective against the drones' heavily armored exteriors. They needed to disable them quickly, or they wouldn't make it to the core. Beckett shouted over the comms, "There's an access terminal down the hall. If we can reach it, I might be able to trigger a shutdown sequence for the drones. But we'll have to get past them first." Lena gritted her teeth, calculating the risk. The drones were closing in, their weapons locking onto the crew with deadly intent. She didn't have much time. With a sharp breath, she signaled for the team to advance. "Move now," Lena shouted. The crew broke cover, charging forward under a hail of plasma fire. The drones retaliated, but the crew was faster now, reacting as one. Lena moved like a shadow, her combat training kicking in as she ducked and weaved through incoming fire. trying to keep the drones distracted long enough for Beckett to reach the terminal. But the Revenant's AI wasn't giving up without a fight. Lena's pulse raced as she sprinted toward the access terminal, every nerve on high alert. The drones were relentless, their eerie mechanical precision making them formidable opponents. Plasma blasts sliced through the air, missing her by mere inches as she ducked behind a pillar. The sharp sting of near misses burned in her senses. "Beckett," she shouted over the chaos, her voice strained. "Get to that terminal. Now." Beckett was already moving, his movements fluid and fast, despite the constant barrage of enemy fire. His fingers flew over his portable console, pulling up the terminal schematics as he made his way down the corridor. Lena could hear the sound of plasma blasts impacting the walls around her, the sizzling energy turning the metal into molten slag. But there was no time to waste. The drones were closing in. Alvarez was already firing again, taking cover behind an overturned bulkhead. His shots were more accurate now, but the drone's armor seemed impenetrable. Lena knew that if they didn't disable the security system soon, they'd be overwhelmed. "Almost there," Beckett called out, his voice laced with tension. His eyes darted between the approaching drones and the terminal. He was so close. Just a few more steps. Lena pushed forward, keeping the drones distracted, firing shots when she could to slow them down. But she was growing increasingly aware that the drones weren't just fighting to protect the ship. They were fighting to protect something much more important. The AI core. The Revenant wasn't just a ship. It was alive in its own twisted way. Its defenses were built with one goal in mind: to ensure that no one could ever get close to its heart. And as much as Lena and her crew tried, the ship's defenses seemed endless, designed to outlast all but the most determined intruders. "Lena, incoming," Alvarez shouted, his voice breaking through the blaring alarms. Lena whipped around just in time to see a massive drone charging toward them, its plasma rifle aimed straight at her chest. It moved with terrifying speed, its mechanical limbs propelled by an eerie jerking motion. Without thinking, Lena dropped to the floor and slid to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. The drone's energy pulse singed the air, but it missed its target. She rolled, getting back to her feet just as another drone took aim. "Take it down," Beckett shouted, still fumbling with the terminal. Alvarez didn't hesitate. He fired a well-placed shot at the drone's exposed power core, hitting it squarely in the chest. The explosion was deafening, sending shards of metal flying across the hall. The drone collapsed to the ground, its lights flickering before it powered down completely. One down, but there were still at least 5 left, and they were closing in fast. Lena felt the pressure mounting. She had to get Beckett to that terminal. There was no other option. "Beckett," Lena screamed again. "We don't have much time." He glanced over his shoulder, sweat dripping from his forehead. His fingers continued to dance across the console, but it was clear he was fighting against the clock. "I'm almost in, Captain. Just a few more seconds." Lena turned back to face the drones, a feeling of determination settling over her. "Alvarez, cover me," she shouted as she moved forward again, drawing her sidearm. She fired a rapid series of shots, the blasts hitting the drones' torsos and limbs, but the damage was minimal. The drones seemed to shrug off the impact as if it were nothing. They were too well built. She needed to get closer, needed to push the advantage. "Now," she barked, and with a sudden burst of speed, she dashed forward, aiming for the farthest drone. She dove to the side just as it took another shot at her, narrowly missing. She slammed into the floor, rolling, and came to a stop just inches from the drone's exposed underside. With a swift motion, she deployed a small explosive charge from her belt and planted it on the drone's hull. "Move back," she shouted, pushing herself to her feet and leaping toward the relative safety of the nearby wall. The blast went off in a split second, the force of the explosion sending the drone into a crumpled heap. The impact threw the other drones off balance, momentarily disorienting them. "Go," Lena yelled. Beckett wasted no time. He sprinted to the terminal, hands flying over the keys. The drones, still dazed from the explosion, tried to regain their footing, but Lena and Alvarez didn't give them the chance. Alvarez fired a few more rounds, buying the time they needed. "We're in," Beckett called out, voice tinged with relief. "I've triggered the shutdown sequence. The drones are offline." Lena exhaled sharply, her heart still pounding in her chest. The battle wasn't over, but they had bought themselves some time. "Let's move," Lena ordered, gesturing for the team to keep going. The door ahead of them slid open with a hiss, revealing a long corridor leading deep into the heart of the Revenant. It was darker here, the lights dim and the air stale, like the ship had been abandoned for eons. But there was something about it, the cold, empty silence, that made it feel alive. Every step they took seemed to echo, as if the Revenant was watching, waiting for them to make the next move. Beckett stepped forward, his face tense but resolute. "We're almost there. The core should be down this way." Lena's mind raced. She knew the Revenant wouldn't just let them walk in and shut down its heart without a fight. But they were so close now, they couldn't afford to hesitate. With a deep breath, she set her jaw. "Let's finish this." The crew moved forward, deeper into the Revenant, toward the core that would either destroy them or give them a chance to end the hunt. The corridors of the Revenant seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness closing in around them like the oppressive weight of the ship itself. The hum of ancient machinery reverberated through the walls, an eerie soundtrack to their tense march. The further they went, the more Lena could feel the ship's pulse, like the low, steady beat of a heart, sending vibrations through the air. They had made it this far, but the Revenant was far from finished with them. Lena led the way, her eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. The team followed closely, weapons drawn and ready, alert for any sign of movement. Beckett, who was still working on deciphering the Revenant's schematics, kept his head down, his fingers tapping rapidly over his portable console. "Only a few more levels down," Beckett muttered, glancing up briefly. His brow was furrowed, and his expression was strained. "We're close, but the core is heavily fortified. We'll need to break through some heavy security before we can get to it." Lena didn't respond. She was too focused on the task ahead. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the Revenant, the heart of the ship that had been hunting them for so long. Her mind raced with questions. What exactly was this core? Was it just an eye, or something more? Something that could threaten all of humanity? She couldn't afford to dwell on the unknown. They had no choice but to move forward. The corridor turned sharply to the left, and Lena signaled for the team to stop. The air was colder now, and the walls were lined with strange symbols, etched into the metal in what looked like ancient alien script. She didn't recognize the language, but she didn't need to. She had seen enough of the Revenant's designs to know that these were the remnants of a long-dead empire, an empire that had seen humanity as a threat to its dominance and had created the Revenant as a final line of defense. As the crew continued down the hallway, Beckett's voice broke through the silence once more. "It's just ahead. The core chamber is up ahead. We need to hurry." Lena's gut tightened. They had come this far, but she knew that whatever lay beyond this door, whatever awaited them in the core chamber, would not be easy to defeat. She gripped her weapon tighter, trying to steady her nerves. They were about to face the culmination of everything the Revenant had been built for, the culmination of its purpose. They reached the door. It was massive, covered in intricate symbols and shifting, pulsing light. The walls surrounding it were adorned with strange mechanical interfaces, systems that had been built to last, designed to keep anyone from ever getting inside. The door itself was sealed shut, a layer of force fields surrounding its edges. There was no way to simply open it. "We need to override the security," Beckett said, stepping forward with his console in hand. "The terminal should be right here." He connected his console to the nearby panel, his fingers moving with frantic precision. The symbols on the door began to pulse brighter, the ship's interior reacting to the intrusion. A soft, unsettling hum filled the air, and the temperature dropped even further. "We don't have much time," Beckett added. "This place wasn't built to let intruders inside. It'll trigger a defense protocol soon. We need to get through, now." Lena glanced around. The ship had been quiet up until now, but she could feel it. Something was stirring. The Revenant's defenses were waking up, and they were running out of time. Suddenly, the terminal beeped, and Beckett's face lit up with a fleeting look of triumph. "I'm in. Just a few more seconds to override the final lockdown." Before he could finish, the entire hallway seemed to vibrate. The walls trembled, and the lights above flickered erratically. Then, with a screech that reverberated through the ship, the security systems powered up. "Here they come," Alvarez shouted, pointing down the hallway. From the shadows, another wave of drones emerged, moving swiftly toward them. These were larger, more advanced than the ones they had fought before, their armor thick and reinforced. Lena's stomach churned. They were cornered. "Get to cover," she ordered, and the team scattered. The drones began firing immediately, their plasma rifles crackling as they released bursts of deadly energy. Lena ducked behind a reinforced wall panel, the searing heat of the shots just missing her. She returned fire, but the drone's armor was too thick for their weapons to have any real impact. "Beckett, hurry up," she shouted, trying to keep the drones at bay. The force of their blasts shook the hallway as they advanced. "I'm almost there." Beckett's voice was tight with urgency. His fingers flew over his console, inputting commands faster than Lena had ever seen him work. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he muttered to himself. But just as it seemed they might be overrun, the door in front of them began to respond to Beckett's commands. The symbols on the door flared brightly, and the humming sound grew louder. Then, with a loud clang, the door began to open, slowly, agonizingly slowly, as if the Revenant itself were fighting to keep them out. Lena didn't wait. She charged forward, gun blazing, providing cover for the others. Alvarez was right behind her, taking down a few of the drones with well-placed shots. Beckett followed, still working feverishly at his terminal, but his eyes were fixed on the door. With a final, resounding crash, the door opened wide, revealing the core chamber beyond. It was a massive, circular room. The walls were lined with glowing data panels and ancient machinery. In the center of the room was a large, spherical structure, black and pulsing with energy. It looked almost alive, as if it were the heart of the ship itself. Lena didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward, eyes fixed on the core. But as she entered the room, the Revenant's final defense mechanism kicked in. The core itself began to react, sending out waves of energy that forced the team to stagger back, their bodies racked with pain from the intense electrical pulses. But they had come too far. The core would either fall or they would. The core pulsed before them, a dark, swirling mass of energy contained within a protective cage of unknown technology. Its hum resonated deep in their bones, sending ripples of discomfort through their bodies. The room was suffocating, its air thick with the sound of ancient machinery coming to life. It felt like the Revenant itself was alive now, conscious, aware, and very angry. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she took in the sight of the core. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to leave before the ship's systems overwhelmed them. But there was no time for retreat. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity lived or died. The crew was positioned around the chamber, each of them with their weapons trained on the core. Their faces were grim, taut with the weight of the mission. Alvarez, Beckett, and the rest were ready for the inevitable battle. "We need to shut it down," Lena said, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. She glanced at Beckett, who was still working feverishly at his console, trying to interface with the core's systems. "You're sure you can get it?" Beckett wiped his brow and nodded, his face etched with concentration. "If I can bypass these security protocols, I'll trigger a shutdown. But this thing's been designed to be nearly indestructible. We need to keep the defenses distracted while I work." I'm not sure how long I'll have before the Revenant activates full lockdown. Before Lena could respond, a sudden surge of energy blasted from the core. The entire room shuddered, the light from the core intensifying, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. A series of mechanical arms extended from the walls, each one holding some form of weapon. A plasma cannon, a pulse blaster, and what looked like an energy blade. The Revenant had begun its counterattack. Lena ducked as the first of the automated arms fired a deadly blast, the plasma streaking past her face. Alvarez and the others immediately dove for cover, their weapons firing in retaliation. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed throughout the chamber as the crew worked in unison, trying to suppress the assault. But the mechanical arms were relentless, responding with deadly accuracy to every movement. "They're everywhere," Alvarez shouted, his voice strained as he took cover behind a large piece of debris. "We can't fight them all off." Beckett grunted, still hacking into the core's terminal. "We need to get that shut down before we're completely overwhelmed." Lena knew he was right. If they didn't end the Revenant's assault now, they wouldn't have a chance to shut down the core. She turned to the others, issuing orders quickly. "We have to disrupt the core's power flow. If we can disable its connection to the rest of the ship, we might be able to slow the systems down long enough for Beckett to finish his hack." "On it," Alvarez responded, moving with purpose as he sprinted toward the nearest conduit. The rest of the team followed, each of them engaging in a desperate, coordinated effort to destroy the key power conduits running through the chamber. Lena kept moving, firing at any drone that came too close. The plasma blasts lit up the room, sending showers of sparks flying in every direction. One of the mechanical arms swung down, but she was ready. With a quick roll, she dodged under the attack, then fired 2 well-aimed shots at its energy core, disabling it with a loud explosion. But more arms and drones were pouring in, faster than they could deal with them. "We can't keep this up for long," Lena muttered through clenched teeth, trying to steady her breathing. Suddenly, the air in the chamber thickened, and a deep, resonant hum filled the room. The core surged, sending out a shockwave of energy that blasted the team backward, forcing them all to the ground. The force of the blast rattled their bones, and for a moment, everything went dark. Lena shook her head, trying to clear the dizziness. Her ears rang, but her instincts kicked in. She scrambled to her feet, already reaching for her gun. The core was glowing brighter now, its pulse erratic. It was charging up, preparing to unleash a devastating attack. "Beckett," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the crackling of the ship's malfunctioning systems. "You've got to do it now." Beckett was hunched over his console, sweat dripping from his face, his fingers flying across the keys. "I'm almost there. Just a few more seconds." Lena didn't wait. She dove back into the fray, her eyes fixed on the drones and mechanical arms that were slowly but surely closing in on them. The Revenant was getting desperate now, and it would stop at nothing to prevent them from succeeding. She fired again and again, each shot finding its mark, but it wasn't enough. The drones kept coming. They couldn't afford to let this go on much longer. "Come on, Beckett," Lena whispered to herself, her heart racing. "We're running out of time." And then, just as the core seemed ready to unleash its final strike, there was a sudden, sharp beep. The glowing core flickered. And then, just as quickly, it shut down. The entire chamber went dark. The mechanical arms froze in place, and the drones stopped moving. A moment of stunned silence passed, broken only by the heavy breathing of the crew. Lena turned to Beckett, who was staring at his console, his eyes wide. "It's done," Beckett said, his voice hoarse. "I triggered the shutdown. The Revenant systems are offline." Lena couldn't believe it. They had done it. They had won. But even as she took a deep breath of relief, she knew it wasn't over. The ship was falling apart around them. They had to escape, and quickly. "Alvarez," Lena said, her voice steady but urgent. "We've got to get to the shuttle. Now." But as they turned to leave, The walls of the chamber began to rumble. The Revenant was fighting back, one final desperate attempt to take them down. "We're not out of the woods yet," Lena muttered. "Move, now," she shouted. And with that, they ran. The rumbling grew louder, shaking the walls of the Revenant, as if the ship itself were buckling under the pressure of their intrusion. The ship's defenses might have been down, but its fury was not. The core had been deactivated, but the Revenant wasn't going to let them leave easily. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted down the corridor, the team in tow. Behind them, the once glowing walls of the ship were beginning to crack and splinter, sparking violently as they began to power down. There was no time to stop and look back. They needed to reach the shuttle bay, and fast. "Keep moving," Lena shouted, her voice hoarse from the exertion. "We're almost there." Beckett, who had remained glued to his console the entire time, was now running ahead of the group, scanning the ship's schematic for any signs of collapse. "We've got 5 minutes before the ship's systems fail completely. The explosion from the core will destabilize the entire ship, and we don't want to be here when that happens." Alvarez was right beside her, his eyes scanning their surroundings, ever watchful. "So, what exactly happens if we don't make it to the shuttle in time? I'm guessing it's not a gentle ride to the surface." Lena didn't have to answer. They all knew what would happen if they didn't escape. If the Revenant self-destructed, they would be caught in the blast, vaporized in an instant. The only hope now was that they could reach the shuttle before the ship turned its final deadly breath on them. The hallway ahead exploded in a shower of debris as another energy pulse shot through the ship's failing systems. The shockwave sent them all tumbling to the floor, and Lena gasped for breath as the air was knocked from her lungs. Her vision blurred, but she pushed herself up immediately, blood and sweat mingling as she fought to regain her footing. "Lena," Beckett called, his voice panicked. "We've got to go now. The shuttle's in the next section, but there's a blast radius expanding out from the core. We're going to have to run through the breach." "Then let's go," she barked, her instincts overriding any lingering doubts. There was no time to waste. If they hesitated, they would die here. The crew surged forward again, this time moving faster, pushing through the wreckage and debris as the Revenant seemed to groan in pain, its metal frame beginning to crumble. Sparks flew from every corner, and the walls cracked, sending loud, metallic screams echoing through the narrow passageways. The hum of the core's energy was replaced by the sound of a countdown, a low, ominous tone warning them that the end was near. As they reached the door to the shuttle bay, Lena slammed her fist against the emergency override, her mind focused on the task. The door slid open with a resounding hiss, revealing the shuttle bay beyond. The shuttle they needed was already prepped, its engines humming, ready for launch. "Get inside," Lena ordered, her breath ragged. They'd wasted no time. Alvarez was the first in, quickly securing the rear hatch, while Beckett and the others followed suit. Lena was the last to climb aboard, pausing only for a second to look at the destruction behind them. The Revenant was falling apart at the seams, its hull cracked open and its systems failing. But as she entered the shuttle, the doors slammed shut with a resounding thud, sealing them inside. Beckett immediately moved to the cockpit, his fingers flying across the controls as he started up the shuttle's engines. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before the core detonation," Beckett said urgently, his voice strained. "I've engaged the thrusters. Hold on tight." Lena strapped herself in and turned to Alvarez, who was grinning despite the situation. "I'm starting to think this ship was never meant to be easy to kill. I have a feeling it won't be the last time we face something like this," Alvarez replied, his eyes scanning the bay. "But I'll take victory where I can get it." The shuttle's engines roared to life, sending a blast of energy that shook the entire craft. The shuttle jolted forward as Beckett expertly maneuvered it away from the ship's crumbling structure. Lena looked back one last time at the Revenant as the shuttle pushed through the debris, and saw the explosion begin, a blinding white light, followed by an earth-shattering shockwave. The Revenant's final moments were violent and destructive. The ship's core, now fully charged with unstable energy, detonated with the force of a small star, sending a wave of destruction that ripped through the remaining structures. The shockwave hit the shuttle hard, tossing it like a toy in the hands of a child. For a moment, Lena felt weightless as the shuttle spun wildly, out of control. But Beckett's calm focus was unwavering. He pushed the shuttle's engines to full throttle, stabilizing their trajectory as the explosion's shockwave passed. And then, just like that, the Revenant was gone. A burst of brilliant light behind them, followed by the expanding debris field of what had once been the greatest weapon humanity had ever faced. They were free. Lena leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a creeping exhaustion. Her body was bruised and battered, but they had made it. They had survived. "We did it," Beckett said, his voice quiet now as he navigated them toward the safety of the nearby planet. Lena didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked out the shuttle's viewport, watching the debris from the Revenant drift into the vastness of space. It was over. But as she turned back to face her crew, she knew the fight for humanity's future was far from finished. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We did. But this is just the beginning."